Hey, what is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, your host and producer of the Dr. Vibe Show, host and co-producer of Do You Know What Time It Is? And geez, other things all over the place, but hey, there we go. And here with Brenden Whittedas, another edition of the Sports Vibe. It's been a little bit of a while since we've been on. Things have been a little bit crazy busy and positive productive in both of our lives, but we are going to keep it going. So, Brenden, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's been a little while since I've seen, so I'm looking forward to getting right back into it.
Excellent, good stuff. Well, let's get right into it. I guess the first thing we'll chat about, it seems like it happened such a long time ago, but the Super Bowl. People are still chatting about it. What were your
Yeah.
thoughts on the game?
It's tough because I like to pretend like I don't have a rooting interest, but I mean I think it's just the natural sports fan and all of us the thing that made us fall in love with sports in the first place is to have a rooting interest that draws me into the game even more. And the first thing everyone wants to talk about is pretty much the last play of the game. It was the decision to throw the ball instead of running it. It's been covered a lot ad nauseum. It There are some interesting numbers on both sides of the argument in Pete Carroll, or I guess Bevel, the offensive coordinator's defense. They saw some stuff they didn't like in the Patriots in their defense, and they decided to throw instead of run. You got Russell Wilson, who's really, really good at taking care of the ball normally, and out of all, and then in retrospect, now that these numbers have come out, and out of all the attempts from the 1 yard line that resulted in a pass attempt, none of them were intercepted except for that play. I understand the numbers behind it. I understood that they were trying to, in Pete Carroll's words, throw a play away because they saw some stuff they didn't like in the Patriots defense, and so they figured we'll run this play and then we'll get into something else that we like a little bit better. They were trying to go for they were really trying to do two things at once. They were trying to run the clock down so that Tom Brady didn't have any time remaining and score on pretty much the final possession. I thought that honestly, even while they were doing it, I thought that was a little much. They burned two timeouts on that last drive. After the Marshawn Lynch play, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure why they weren't prepared after that one. But after the second play, it actually kind of looked like both teams were waiting after that insane Jermaine Kearse catch. I think it looked like both teams were kind of waiting for the referees to stop the game and to go review it because it was so crazy that the ball bounced and hit pretty much every single one of his appendages before he caught it. And so you kind of saw both teams kind of lollygagging, looking around, and I guess assuming that they were going to to go and review that play, which is usually what they do in the last 2 minutes. If it's a close play like that, they'll go back and review it. It didn't, so they ended up burning a second timeout. So then they got to a situation where they wanted to run clock, but they only had one timeout, and so they felt that they couldn't run the ball without it being a little bit too tenuous of a situation, and didn't want to get into a situation where they run it, then they have to call the last timeout, and then they're therefore forced to throw it the last two possessions in the down series. But I mean, all that said, Marshawn Lynch is Marshawn Lynch, and there is such a thing as overthinking the situation. And I really think that that's really what they fell into. I think they were just trying to do too much at one time. Sure, you don't want to give Tom Brady, don't want to give him time, but I mean, it's 30 seconds left, 40 seconds left. Just play the game, and if Brady ends up having some miraculous comeback where he's got three timeouts and he goes the field on you, you just got beat by Tom Brady, and I think it's a lot easier to live with that than we were afraid to give it to him.
Yeah.
Exactly, we were afraid to give it to him, and then we ended up just turning the ball over and really giving the game away. And it was tough because that was such a good game. It's tough for that whole game to get boiled down to that one play, but that's really all you're going to hear about, and it's really all that anyone's ever going to talk about.
Let me ask, was it the right play, bad execution, or was it just the wrong play, period?
I thought it was just the wrong play. I mean, and it's very easy to come back, now that we've had the hindsight and things of that nature. But even when they were coming out in that formation and I saw Russell Wilson was in the shotgun, I was a little surprised, but I was like, well, maybe they'll run an option play or something like that because Marshawn Lynch had been so effective running the ball that Russell Wilson had been able to get out on the perimeter, especially later in that game once the defense tired. I thought that was where they were going. I thought that was really kind of the only place to go. And so a slant over the middle, I mean, credit Browner for stopping the pick play, which is what they're running. They're running two wide receivers so that they can rub a rub route and have the Patriots actually end up clipping each other. And so Lockett is supposed to be open on that play. So Russell's throwing it before he actually sees him become open. And credit to Browner for hemming up the inside receiver and keeping Butler alive in that play. And Butler, the rookie, makes a fantastic play of his own merit.
Well, it's interesting too because the Patriots said they had seen the play in practice. They practiced. They saw them, knew the formation was coming.
Yeah, and look, I understand why you want to throw the ball with the timing of the clock situation, but don't overthink it. It's Marshawn Lynch. What's one of the more interesting things to me is how the narrative switches so quickly based off of one play, where now you have a lot of people saying, well, is Tom Brady the best player ever, or the best quarterback ever, excuse me. And that's interesting because if he loses that game, that conversation not being had. Then he's 3-3 and 3-for-6 in Super Bowls, and he doesn't play any differently. You know what I mean? Like if that play goes off without a hitch, or if that's the interception, his game hasn't changed at all. But we think of them in I guess historical context a lot differently. And then now Tom Brady's got 4 instead of 3, and so now these rings, and what does that mean? It's just interesting to see how sports media can manipulate stuff.
I think it's, he has won 4, but I think he didn't win this 4 outright. This number 4 was sort of given to him, don't you think?
It feels that way, but I mean, look, the Seattle Seahawks were up by 10 late in that game, and they had an opportunity to put their foot on the throats of the Patriots, and they came back. Tom Brady was 13-15 in the fourth quarter. He was sensational. When they needed him to be good, he was really good.
I think one of the key points in that game is there was a Seattle drive where they went 3 and out in the fourth quarter when they were up by 10. I think that was the key turning point that let everything come awry. If they would have sustained a drive even for 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, they kind of went away from the running game. And it's funny because everyone was talking about the catch that Kearse did make. Kearse actually has a play on one of those drive on that drive you were talking about on third down. Russell Wilson just throws a bucket pass right over the shoulder. If Kearse comes down with that, they get that first down. They move the chains. They run more clock, and maybe you don't have any of those late game heroics from Tom Brady at all. So it's again that dynamic of what we will remember and what we won't. 4 or 5 years from now, what are we going to remember from that game? Most likely the play. Most likely Jermaine Kearse's actual catch. We'll remember Tom Brady having a really, really good fourth quarter. Will we remember all the other things that led up to it? Time will tell.
Excellent. Just before we close out, who is a better bet for getting into the Super Bowl next year, New England or Seattle?
Well, it's interesting that Seattle, I wasn't even aware exactly how banged up that secondary was, the famed Legion of Boom. Earl Thomas is going in for surgery. Richard Sherman is debating whether or not to have Tommy John surgery. Cam Chancellor had a torn MCL and played through the entire game with it. So that the strength of that defense, arguably the strength of that team, was non-existent. I mean, you saw it a little bit when they would the run after the catch that you don't usually see the Seattle Seahawks give up. They had a lot more run after catch. Lang, the cornerback that intercepted Tom Brady earlier in the game, he broke his arm. So they were really the walking wounded on that back front. So it's unfortunate that that's kind of what happened. If they can get back healthy, which is always a big if, sure, you think Seattle's going to be able to do it again because I can only see Russell Wilson getting better. But keep in mind, if we saw this with Miami Heat, after a while, those deep playoff runs that you are constantly going into, they catch up with you. I mean, you're just playing extra games, your extra practices. You're playing just your season's so much longer, so you look up and you've actually ended up playing about another season and a half than anyone else has. I just think 3 Super Bowls in a row is just. I mean, you're sure you had Buffalo to do in the early '90s, but that's something that we're not going to see. I don't feel like Seattle is going to be back, and so so therefore it would be the Patriots if I were just to pick them.
I think Patriots are a better bet for a number of reasons. One, they play in an easier division. 2, I don't see too many threats. I think the biggest threat that New England has for the Super Bowl is Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of their bugaboo game. The Colts are still you see a lot of potential with the Colts, but they still have pieces to add. You don't know what's going to happen in Denver. Peyton still hasn't decided whether or not he's going to come back. They still have to decide about Demaryius Thomas and Julian Thomas, whether or not they're going to resign them and what their teams are really going to look like. They got a new coach, so like everything for Denver has changed, and they were probably right under if you were going to say who would be the next to challenge the Patriots. They would probably be the next ones, and you don't know what you're going to get out of them. So, yeah, I agree. Baltimore Ravens are pretty much the only other, at least at this point. And in football, one of the great things about football is you're always going to have one or two surprise teams where you just had no idea that they were going to get better. But, yeah, just looking, really far ahead, sure, I ultimately agree with that.
All right, well, let's flip on to the next conversation piece. And you are a huge University of North Carolina Tar Heel fan, and I know you have a few things to share about the passing away of their legendary coach, Dean Smith.
Yeah, he was just it's very difficult to try to explain what he meant to not only the game but to this general area, this North Carolina area. And when I say that, I mean, so one of the things they did was to help integrate the ACC, and I can't explain that enough, and I can't put that any more bluntly or simply. Charlie Scott was really one of the first ACC black stars to be playing on a team, and so the fact that he didn't ask anybody if he could recruit him or anything, he just went and saw that Charlie Scott could play, and so he wanted him to be on the team. And so once Charlie Scott got there, that made it more comfortable for other guys, not just at UNC, but the David Thompson, John Lucas, the ACC at large, fertile ground for black athletes. Because keep in mind, this is in the 60s in the South, and things are very heated. There's very contentious. And at 18 years old, sure, you can be like, yeah, I want to be a pioneer, or you could just say, I want to go to college and see what I can get out of this college basketball life. And the fact that they were able to get Buck Williams and Cornell Maxwell, like Cornbread Maxwell, to come and be a part of the ACC and be that's something special, and that's something you can't really overstate at all. And in addition to that, it wasn't just with segregation. He was fought against the Vietnam War, Thousand Unjust War, fought against the North Carolina having the death penalty. I mean, if you think about some of the things that these are really hot button issues. And for not only just a coach, but a prominent coach at a prominent university to take these sorts of hard stances, that's something you really don't see in the public eye anymore.
Well, that's hardly see anything like that with coaches or athletes these days.
Exactly, and the fact that he felt so very comfortable in his own skill. One of the things that comes out of someone passing is you get a lot of people telling stories about how they knew him and what he was. And one of the more interesting things was his relationship with Reverend Robert Seymour, who was pastor emeritus at Olin T. Binkley Memorial Baptist Church, where Dean Smith was a member. And just their sorts of interactions, he would talk about you should never be proud of doing what's right. Like, that was one of his quote. Like, that was the kind of man he was. And then to go further with it, his relationship with his players, pretty much to a man, all the players talked about him being so important to their development and maturation, not just as basketball players, but as young men. Michael Jordan, I think, came out a couple of days ago talking about how he considered him a second father, and we all remember how close Jordan and his actual father were. Eric Montross, a former All-American NBA player, just talked about the small things that he would do. He'd write him a handwritten note before the NBA season would start, and just say, just have a good season. And if you know how many players that Dean Smith put into the NBA, and for him to still take the time to write these guys and still be involved in their lives, show up to their weddings, like this is what he did. He was always as interested and invested as in them maturing on the court as they were off the court. I think that those things go without saying. But Dean Smith, you can easily get caught up in all the off-the-court stuff, but just as a reminder, he also retired as the all-time leading men's Division I coach in terms of wins with 879, 2 NCAA championships, 11 Final Fours, 13 ACC titles, ACC tournament titles.
Yeah.
I mean, he was everything. I mean, he was the guy off the court and the guy on the court that you wanted. And, I mean, to me, he's always going to be the best coach to ever do it.
I guess what we would say is if there's a Mount Rushmore of coaches in the 21st century in the NCAA, his face has got to be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he helped raise that ACC conference to at one time probably the most prominent college basketball conference in America, no doubt. He was at the foundation of it.
Yeah, and you can still see his fingerprints on the game now. He instituted the four corners, which was essentially having their best ball handler at the top of the key and spreading the defense out. You still see that with teams like the Hawks and the Spurs now in terms of getting your spacing right, the spacing being of the utmost important. He pushed for the shot clock. I mean, he was an innovator in a time when it could have easily not been.
All right, well, getting on to our next conversation piece. It's halfway time, our half-season mark for the NBA All-Star Game coming up this weekend. First, any comments you have about the All-Star Game?
I love the All-Star Game because I never felt like anybody took it too seriously. You know, baseball fans seem like they take the MLB's All-Star Game really, really seriously, and now they kind of have to because it determines home field in the World Series, which doesn't really make any real sense. But they were trying to make it more energy, more charismatic, especially after it ended in the tie that one year. But the NBA All-Star, I think basketball in general lends itself better to an All-Star game. Football is just too violent of a sport to kind of be going halfway or to have a real exhibition. Basketball, you get a chance to see exactly what you want. Not a ton of defense, but you get to see a lot of high flying, a lot of three-pointers. I mean, it's just fun. It's just a good time, and they've turned it really into an entire week. You got the skills competition. They've incorporated the WNBA, former players. So honestly, I think they do the best job of having a showcase of their All-Stars.
Well, what are your thoughts halfway mark of the season this year?
What's funny? I've gone back and looked at some of the old vibes, sports vibes, and where we're talking about Cleveland, and it's funny because when it first started out, when I was first mentioning them, it looked like they were really, really struggling. And then LeBron takes that 2 weeks off. They make the trade for Mozgov. They incorporate Iman Shumpert. They add J.R. Smith. And suddenly this team looks much different than they did. They're a little bit better on defense. They're much better on offense. Kevin Love is still having a bit of trouble getting it constantly incorporated into that offense. But to me, that only shows that their ceiling is going to get higher. 13 winners of 13 of their last 14. I think about a game and a half outside of first place for Chicago. This team looks as much like a real championship contender as we've seen out of the East. So that them and Atlanta they've looked the best so far coming out of the East, and I know the West is getting a lot of pub, as they should, because they're incredibly deep. You're seeing the Pelicans and OKC both with real talent on their rosters, still fighting to try to get in. But in terms of the East, those are the best two teams that I've seen. From the West, Golden State has been. They've just been fantastic all year long. The incorporation of Steve Kerr and some of the more fluid offensive sets they've been running has Steph Curry looking as a real MVP candidate. In fact, if I were to pull one right now, it would be for him. It's going to be interesting to see if Andrew Bogut can stay healthy, which has been a really big if for them, so that they can have he and Festus Ezeli down low in the post that will make them a little bit less vulnerable in defense. I think that this could be one of those very rare occurrences in the NBA history where you have two new teams, for lack of a better term, in the finals. Usually you get a repeat, at least one repeat. This time I think you're going to see two new ones.
Who's MVP?
Yeah, Curry's looked really, really good. James Harden, absolutely, you have to give him credit because he's really fought and looked better on defense this year. Dwight Howard's been in and out of the lineup. The longer he's kind of got this mysterious knee injury, the more I'm thinking this is much more serious than perhaps they let on in the beginning. Harden's been fantastic. Man, I like what the Pelicans have done. If they can get into the playoffs, maybe Anthony Davis has an outside shot. The West is so deep that if he's able to pull that team up as a lone superstar and get them into the tourney, yeah, I could definitely see that. Russell Westbrook has had a phenomenal year. and again, OKC is not in the playoff picture, right? Or not, they're not in the playoffs right now. But his PER is insane. He's just playing at a really, really high level. And Kevin Durant's been in and out of the lineup trying to get his health right. If they can, this is going to be one of the really, really weird years where if they can get healthy and they can just find their way into this tournament, they've got enough veterans on that team that have played for real, for real. So they might be able to be one of the first 8 seeds that we can see that can make a legitimate run at a title. So it's going to be really, really epic during the playoffs because the West, regardless of who is number 1 or number 2, there's not going to be any clear favorites any round, and that's insane.
The West is going to be just a dogfight right from the beginning to the end.
Absolutely, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. And the East is too. I mean, like it's not quite as deep. The 6th, 7th, and 8th teams aren't as strong, but you look at the top of that conference, and you got Chicago, you got Toronto, you got Washington. John Wall has had a phenomenal just. Watching him steadily get better over the last 3 years has been a lot of fun. Especially for a Raleigh boy like myself, it's been really cool to see him just get better defensively. He's leading the league in assists right now. I still do have some questions about his jump shot and the consistency of it. And so late in the playoffs, you'll see teams really, really force him to pull that. But that team is really, really built very, very interestingly. They've got 2 guys in the low post with Nene and Gortat that can both operate with their back to the basket. That's something a lot of teams can't say that they have. So if my dark horse, because I mean I think they're 3rd or 4th right now, would be the Wizards. I know they're not the Hawks and they're not as star-studded as the Cavs, but the Wizards are just built like a really sound fundamental team, and they've been together for a while, and I definitely think that helps.
What are your thoughts on Memphis?
I really liked what Memphis did with the Jeff Green pickup. For so long, they've been bereft on the perimeter scoring, and he does a phenomenal job of playing his role. He's not a guy that you have to give the ball to, and he has to get up 15 to 20 shots a night. That's never been Jeff Green. In fact, that's kind of been one of the things that people always wanted from him. They wanted him to be more aggressive. Well, now he can be a 4th option. You know, he can be behind Randolph and Gasol and Conley and still be a great 4th option, and he feels much more comfortable in that role than if you were to try to showcase him on a nightly basis. That pickup was really, really big for them. It showed that they understood where their weaknesses were, and it's very, very, it's so tough because I fall in love almost every night watching a different team play because I'm gorging myself on as many of these teams as I can find. And so one night I can't think that anybody will ever be Golden State. Another night I'm watching Memphis in the grindhouse and thinking who can win enough games in Memphis to knock them out. I mean, when Rajon Rondo was healthy, I really liked Dallas. So I mean, this is you get a potpourri of really, really good teams in the West, and it's going to be a lot of fun for them. Like you can tell that I'm really excited about it.
He's hardcore, folks, because I remember we were having a chat, private Google chat, and he was just fixated on the basketball. Like he wouldn't even look at me. He was so core into watching The Rock, and it was so good. Well, no problem. Well, to end off this edition of the Sports Vibe, just recently, was it last week, the big announcement of high school players signing with colleges, NCAA colleges, and it's out of control. Like it's a whole day event on ESPN. It's like big media coverage, and all these are high school kids, man. What's that all about?
It's really, really, you know what, as much as I love sports and I'm enthralled with sports, this is one of the very few things that I just can't get into. Like I understand the draw because it's college, it's college football, it's their personnel acquisition. And so it'd be much like in the NBA in the offseason, you get a free agent, you get that free agent, except there's no salary cap. So outside of the scholarship cap, you can sign as many of these guys as you want to. And I get it. I had a chance to live in Louisiana for a little while, go hang out on LSU's campus, and it's palpable down there. Like they know all these high schoolers' names. They've known them for years. And now there's developed, because there is so much fame and there's so much media attention. Now the kids have kind of gotten more and more into it, where they'll verbally commit somewhere, but that's not binding. So they might end up switching at the last minute, and a coach's hours and hours of a coach's life that he spent chasing this 17-year-old around just goes down the drain on TV as he watches. It's crazy. Yeah, it seems weird. I kind of remember when when it was first happening, when high schoolers, for not just football, but in basketball, when LeBron James got a few of his games on ESPN. I remember it being like a really, really big thing, and now I'm sitting here watching Thon Maker on YouTube and stuff like that. So these high schoolers are becoming more and more exposed. So you're getting a chance to see them younger and younger. I don't necessarily know if that's what's best for everyone involved, to be honest with you. The more I talk to coaches and people that really spend a lot of time around them, they're like, yeah, maybe them getting so much so soon in terms of fame isn't great for them developing as people or them developing their games, because at 16, 17, somebody following you around telling you how great you are, you're more than likely going to believe it. So maybe that's not the best for their maturation, but this is the society we live in, and there's so much money tied up into college football, and so it's trickled down to high school football, and you're actually seeing a lot of the more innovative coaches in high school football too. A lot of the stuff is actually trickling up in terms of the way they run the spread options and these sorts of things. A lot of that was founded in the high school and has kind of come up, and you've seen it even in the pros. So high school is a hotbed right now for college football, for high school football. So it's a brand new world.
Yeah, is it gotten out of control though, man? Come on,
it seems like it has. I mean, honestly, it does. It has seemed like it.
Well, before we round out on this edition of this Sports Vibe, got to get a Brenden sports take, a boxing take. Sorry.
Well, look, we're finally getting to a point where the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight looks more and more likely. I know it's not necessarily the fight that everybody wanted. I know it's been a few years in the making, but I'm very confident that you're going to see one of the better fights that you've seen in a while, because they're both still really, really good. And I'm looking forward to the fight in earnest as much as I ever have, because they're two pioneers and have been pound for pound some of the best fighters we've seen for a really, really long time. I'm still looking for a few other guys at the middleweight division. If we can get maybe Canelo and Triple G, and there's a lot of good boxing to be had, but the crown jewel, I think, is going to be that Mayweather-Pacquiao fight.
All right, good stuff. Well, another Sports Vibe has ended. And Brenden, thanks again. How can people get in touch with you?
You can look me up on Twitter. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. WBHU alum. That's at WBHUALUM. You can also catch me from 9 to 11 every Saturday morning. Click the Sports Shop Radio. Click listen, and just tune in and let us know what you think.
Excellent. Well, I'm your host and producer of this show, and of the Dr. Vibe Show, and host and co-producer of the Goodman Project Show at thegoodmanproject.com. One of the most viewed sites in the world. As always, we say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. God bless, peace be well, and keep the faith. And we'll be back with another edition real soon. Bye-bye.